What's up, you freaking geniuses? So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to write the equation of a linear function when you're given two specific values, all right? So we're going to just go over two examples. Let's start with this easier one first. So this one says write the linear function f for which f of 1 is equal to 3 and f of 4 is equal to 0, and graph the function. Okay, so let's start with writing the linear function. So as you can see, it gives us two values of the function, right? F of 1 is equal to 3 and f of 4 is equal to 0. So remember, this is basically set up as f of x is equal to some output y, all right? So here we're given the x and y coordinate. Okay, so here f of 1 is equal to 3 is really just a coordinate. The x coordinate is 1 and the y coordinate is 3, right? Same thing over here, f of 4 is equal to 0. This is the x coordinate and this is the y coordinate. All right, so since we know we have two coordinates, the first thing we have to do is find the slope between those two coordinates, all right? So remember, the slope formula is m is equal to y sub 2 minus y sub 1, x sub 2 minus x sub 1, all right? So here we just need to label these two coordinates as x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2. So let's just label this first one as x sub 1, and this one as y sub 1, and this one can be x sub 2, and this one can be y sub 2, all right? So let's plug these into our slope formula right here. So y sub 2 minus y sub 1, that's going to be 0 minus 3, and that's going to be over x sub 2 minus x sub 1, which is going to be 4 minus 1. All right, so on top we get negative 3, on the bottom we get positive 3, and negative 3 divided by positive 3 is equal to negative 1. All right, so that's the slope between these 2 points. So the last thing we have to do is write the rest of the function, which we can do using the point slope formula. So the point slope formula, if you don't remember, is y minus y sub 1 is equal to m times x minus x sub 1. So we know a few of these points, right? So first of all, we know the slope. We just found that, right? It's equal to negative 1. And we can also plug in one of our coordinates here in for x sub 1 and y sub 1, all right? You don't have to pick this one that we labeled as x sub 1 and y sub 1. You could pick this other one if you wanted to, because both of these points run through the exact same line. Okay, but to keep it easy, let's just use this first coordinate point right here. So this x sub 1 and y sub 1, we're going to plug into this x sub 1, y sub 1, right? So we have 1 and 3. So we're going to plug in a 1 right there and a 3 right there. And remember, our slope is equal to negative 1, right? So we'll plug that in right there. So here, let's plug in those numbers, and we'll get that y minus 3 is equal to negative 1 times x minus 1. All right, so now if we simplify this, we'll get that y minus 3 is equal to, and then here we can distribute this negative 1 into the parentheses. So we'll get negative x plus 1. All right, now moving everything to the right, so we can write this as a linear equation. We can add this 3 to both sides. So then here we get that y is equal to negative x plus 4. All right, so there is our linear equation. And if you wanted to write it as a linear function, you could simply replace this y with an f of x, right? So we could just write this as f of x is equal to negative x plus 4. Okay, so that is the function, and now let's clean some of this junk up and just graph it really quick. So graphing it should be fairly straightforward because, as I pointed out, we already have two coordinates, right? So we have this coordinate right here, so 1, 3, so let's just say 1, 3 is about there, and then our other coordinate is at 4, 0, so we'll say 4, 0 is about there, and then we just have to connect the dots, right? Boom. And there is our beautiful graph. All right, now let's just try one last example that's going to be just a little bit harder. So this one says, write the linear function f for which f of 1/2 is equal to negative 5/3, f of 6 is equal to positive 2, and graph the function. Okay, so again, the first thing we want to do is just find the linear function, right? And we do that with these two given values. So remember, these are simply two coordinates, right? So this is our x coordinate and this is our y coordinate. So that's our first coordinate point right there. And then this is also an x coordinate, and this is also a y coordinate, right? So that's our second coordinate point. Okay, so again, remember the first step is finding the slope between these two given points. So let's label these as x sub 1 and y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2. So first, let's find the slope. So again, that's y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So here we're going to get 2 minus negative 5/3, and that's going to be all over x sub 2, which is 6. So we're going to do 6 minus 1/2. Okay, so then here, in order to add and subtract fractions, you need to have the same denominator. So to turn this into a fraction, write this 2, we can simply multiply it by 3 over 3. Okay, why am I multiplying it by 3 over 3? Well, if you look at this fraction over here that we're trying to add or subtract it to, this has a denominator of 3. Okay, so in order to turn this 2 into an equivalent fraction, we need to multiply it by 3 over 3. Because it's kind of the same thing as multiplying by 1, right? So we're not really changing the value, right? Because 3 over 3, that's just equal to 1. But we're trying to change it into an equivalent fraction. So anyways, here we have 2 times 3 over 3. So on top, 2 times 3 is equal to 6. And on the bottom, we just have this 3, right? 6/3. So let's write that right here. So instead of 2, let's write 6/3. And then we're subtracting this negative 5/3. And then again, that's over 6 minus 1/2 is just 5.5. Okay, so we'll have 5.5 down here. And now here we're subtracting a negative number. When you subtract a negative number, that's the same thing as adding, right? So really on top, what we have here is 6/3 plus 5/3, which is equal to 11/3. All right, and that's going to be over 5.5. Now here, it'd be easier to just turn this into an improper fraction, so we can kind of match it with this improper fraction. So in order to do that, you can simply multiply these two numbers together and then add the numerator. So 2 times 5 is equal to 10, and 10 plus 1 is equal to 11. So we're going to have 11 on top, and then whatever denominator here you have, you just keep that the same, so we'll leave it as a 2. Now lastly, here we're dividing fractions. So in order to divide fractions, all you need to remember is KFC. Keep, flip, change. So you're going to keep the first fraction on top. So let's just write it over here, 11/3. We're going to flip the second fraction upside down. So instead of 11 over 2, we're going to write it as 2 over 11, and then change. So instead of dividing here, we're actually going to multiply. And to multiply fractions, you just multiply straight across, right? But here you can see we have an 11 on the top and the bottom, so those cancel out. So then here we're simply left with 2/3, right? So after all that, we found out that the slope is equal to positive 2/3, right? So now let's clear some of this junk. And now we can move on to the second step, which again was just using the point slope formula, right? So y minus y sub 1 is equal to m times x minus x sub 1. So again, we know what the slope is, right? It's 2/3. So we'll plug that in right here. And then we just need to plug in one of our coordinates right here for x sub 1 and y sub 1. Again, it doesn't have to be what we originally labeled as x sub 1 and y sub 1. We can use the other one. And in this case, we're going to want to use the other one, right? Because I don't want to mess with all these fractions again, right? So let's not plug those in. Let's use these nice clean numbers that we have right here. So our x coordinate is 6 and our y coordinate is 2, right? So we're going to plug in a 6 and a 2. Okay, so then here we're going to get y minus 2 is equal to 2/3 times x minus 6. There we go. So then here we're going to get y minus 2 is equal to, and then we just distribute this, right? 2/3 times x minus, and 2/3 times 6, well, 2 times 6 is equal to 12. So we're going to have 12 over 3, which 12 over 3 is equal to simply 4, right? So we'll just write a 4 right there. Okay, now lastly, we need to isolate y, right? So we can write our linear equation. So let's get rid of this negative 2 by adding 2 to both sides. They cancel out, so we're left with y is equal to 2/3 x, and then negative 4 plus 2 is equal to negative 2, right? Minus 2. Minus 2, all right? And then lastly, again, if we just want to write it as a function, we'll just say f of x is equal to 2/3 x minus 2. All right, there's our function. Now again, the last thing we want to do is simply graph this linear function. So let's draw our axes right here. And our first point is at 1/2 -5/3, right? So 1/2 -5/3, which is the same thing as -1.66666, right? So it's kind of between -1 and -2. So we'll just say something around here. We can label some points. We'll say that's -1, and that's -2, and we'll say this is 1 right there, okay? And then lastly, we have 6, 2, right? So then 6, 2 is gonna be somewhere over here. And then lastly, just connect, whoa, missed it. Lastly, let's connect these dots, close enough. And there's your graph. So if you found the video helpful, make sure to leave a thumbs up down below. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments section below.